Cinema is littered with organised crime and gangsters, stylish anti-heroes that crave wealth and power. They play by their own rules and stop at nothing to get what they want. Their appearance has changed somewhat throughout the decades, from their screen debut in the silent era to more recent incarnations like the wise guys of Goodfellas and the smooth-talking criminals of the Tarantino-verse. Although crime has been the topic of film since the very beginning, the rules, conventions, and ideology of the gangster film as a genre didn't emerge and solidify until the beginning of the sound era, and they started largely with three films: Little Caesar and the Public Enemy from 1931, and Scarface from 1932. But what are these tropes? Why did they arise, and how are they still affecting cinema today? Hello and welcome to 100 Years of Cinema. We'll be taking a look at least one film each year from 1915 onwards to track the evolution of film over the last century. The gangster film has its roots back in the silent era. The first mention of a gang comes from the 1906 film The Black Hand, but the first film that starts to resemble a gangster movie as we would know it today was The Musketeers of Pig Alley from 1912, which takes us down the mean streets of New York's Other Side, using real gangsters and prostitutes as extras. In 1915 we would see our first feature-length gangster film with Regeneration, and perhaps the best example of a gangster movie from the silent era came with Underworld in 1927. However, these films failed to capture the same essence of the gangster that would become standard in later films. Silent gangsters are presented as outlaws with hearts of gold. Their criminality is the result of poverty, and their arcs tend to centre around redemption. This perception of the gangster would change massively by the early 1930s. By the time the talkies rolled around, America had been living through almost 10 years of Prohibition, and this had led to an explosion in real-world organised crime. Gangsters like Al Capone had become celebrities and anti-heroes, and events like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre had been written into the public consciousness. At the same time, the 1929 Wall Street crash and the following Great Depression had cost millions of Americans their jobs, and as the market collapsed, it took with it all notion of an American meritocracy, as the middle and working class were abandoned by the same social structures that they helped to create. Out of the ashes, Hollywood created a new kind of folk hero based on real-world gangsters like Al Capone, starting with Little Caesar in 1931. Caesar Rico Bandello, played by Edward G. Robinson, was a new kind of protagonist. It's hard to call him a hero or even really an anti-hero. He's an aggressive and ruthless bully. His actions and criminality don't come from poverty, rather from greed. He was the first character to express the real desire of the gangsters that would come after him, that money is secondary to power.
Money? Yeah, money's all right, but it ain't everything. Now, be somebody. Look hard at a bunch of guys and know that they'll do anything you tell them. Have your own way or nothing. Be somebody.
The character was designed to be a warning against the kind of criminality and greed shown in the film. In the end, Rico is gunned down by police, and the film is preceded with a Bible verse, Matthew 26:52, that those who live by the sword shall die by the sword. And yet the character resonated with audiences and became the basis for all other gangsters that would come after him. His impact was so big that if you ask a child today to do an impression of a gangster, you'll probably get something pretty close to this.
Hey, you're a big guy now, ain't you, shooting your mouth off in the papers? So I ran out when it got hot, huh? You think I can't take it no more? Well, listen, you crummy, flat-footed copper, I'll show you whether I lost my nerve and my brains.
So why was the character of Rico so alluring to 1930s audiences? He represents an individual's struggle for power against the structure of society. He transcended the existing economic hardships of the early 1930s and achieved the American dream. But he did so at the expense of his morality and eventually his life.
Is this the end of Rico?
Warner Brothers followed this up the same year with The Public Enemy, and with it they upped the violence, danger, and blatant immorality. More than Little Caesar, The Public Enemy begins to develop the iconography of the gangster movie, informing the look of films like Angels with Dirty Faces and White Heat, and later gangster films like Miller's Crossing and The Godfather. The film was loosely based on the book Beer and Blood, a real-world account of gang warfare written by two Chicago gangsters, and it presents a darker, grittier underworld than we had seen before. The film introduced the womanizing gangster, gun battles, bootlegging, Tommy guns and more. We chart the rise of an empire through better clothes and nicer cars, and at the same time we follow a man's increasing hardness and bitterness following a life of crime. Many of the ideas, images, and even entire scenes will be seen again and again throughout cinema. The Public Enemy proved that audiences were ready for a grisly, realistic crime film, and in 1932, Warner Bros. Delivered with one of the most bloodthirsty and violent films of the pre-code era, Scarface. With the characters and iconography newly established, Scarface gave us the ultimate gangster film of the 1930s. It tells the story of Antonio Camonte, a charming if brash gangster who kills his way to the top of the Chicago bootlegging market and eventually becomes the kingpin of the entire city. Tellingly, the film opens with a murder.
You know, Costello was the last of the old-fashioned gang leaders. There's a new crew coming out.
As if director Howard Hawks knew that this represented the final strokes in the invention of the modern gangster film. The film is crude and bold, the action is fast and frequent. No care is given to a motive or a reason behind Tony's lust for power. What's important is the control and domination of the social structure. When Tony is pinned down and almost killed by machine guns, his first thoughts are not of his own safety, but how the machine gun can be used to exert his power over the city.
They got machine guns you can carry. If I had some of them, I could run the whole works in a month.
So much of Scarface would be recycled again and again, the idea of going down in a hail of bullets rather than surrender. A menacing gangster flipping a coin, or a mob war that brings chaos to an entire city, all start with this film. Scorsese would reuse the X motif to precede death in The Departed, and Francis Ford Coppola would do the same thing with oranges in The Godfather. The film would show the gangster's success not as the result of intelligence, but stemming from violent, thuggish behaviour and a willingness to break with accepted morality to get what they want. A reoccurring theme established by Scarface that would be seen in so many other films is the lead character achieving their goal of material goods and power, but in doing so, isolating themselves from the world. The film's raw and violent depiction of gang life brought it to the attention of the Motion Picture Production Code, who thought that it showed the life as crime as too easy and even enjoyable. The MPPC and the Hays Office demanded changes to the film, including a new ending, an amendment to the start of the film, and changes to scenes that would depict Tony as less sympathetic and therefore less aspirational.
They bring nothing but disgrace to my people.
All right.
The film was cited as one of the major reasons behind a stricter enforcing of the Hays Code, meaning that all films released after 1934 would require a certificate from the MPPC before they could be shown in cinemas. The irony is that a film as violent, cold and bloodthirsty as Scarface wouldn't be seen again until the decline of the Hays Code in the late 1940s, but you would see its echoes in every gangster film that followed. Hey, thanks for watching 100 Years of Cinema. My name's Charlie. If you've watched videos from this channel before and you've noticed a slight boost in audio quality, you can thank my Patreon supporters for helping me buy some better audio equipment. I'd particularly like to give a shout out to my latest supporters, that's Peter O'Brien, Thomas Lurch, Sean McCarthy, Jerome and Thomas Barton. Thank you so much, your support really does mean a lot. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you want to see more of my videos, you can click just here. If you want to subscribe, you can click just here. And if you want to watch a Patreon exclusive video comparing the original to the remake of Scarface, click the button just here. Thank you so much for watching, I'll see you next time.
Is this the end of Rico?